Rising above the campus of Missouri State University, in the heart of Springfield, Missouri, stands a remarkable structure. This is more than a simple bell tower. It is actually one of the largest musical instruments in the Midwest. This instrument is the Jane A. Meyer carillon. The Jane A. Meyer carillon automatically plays the Westminster chime sequence every 15 minutes and marks the hour with a series of rings. Twice a week, at noon, students and faculty are treated to a musical performance by Professor Dr. Jeremy Chessman.
Always the first thing is you have to figure out what is a carillon. And I would explain it that it's a keyboard instrument, it's a musical instrument that's made up of a keyboard that's usually in a tower with bells, and the bells have to be 23 or more bells, and they have to be cup-shaped bells. A tubular bell, like a chime, is technically not a carillon. So 23 or more cup-shaped bells that are played from a mechanical keyboard is like the official definition.
The Jane A. Meyer carillon houses 48 bells. The largest of these produces the deep brass note of C3 and weighs nearly 6,000 pounds. That is nearly twice the weight of the average car. The smallest bell produces the high soprano note of C7 and weighs a mere 30 pounds. Together, the 48 bells collectively weigh more than 16 tons, about the weight of 9 cars. Each bell was cast at the Royal Ijsbouts Foundry in the Netherlands and inscribed with the mark of its maker and year it was cast. Playing the carillon begins with the carillonner climbing the tower to reach the keyboard cabin. This cabin is located directly below where the bells are housed and contains a mechanical keyboard known as a clavier that resembles the keyboard of a piano. Unlike a piano, each of these keys is attached to a wire that passes through the roof and into the bell space. These wires run through a system of levers and connect to a heavy bronze ball called a clapper. These clappers are the only things that move instead of the individual bells. When these clappers hit the bell, it produces the iconic carillon sound.
So we play the carillon with our fist. The keys are shaped kind of like a broom handle. You can see right here. They're too far apart to play with my fingers. Although sometimes the upper ones, because they're a little bit lighter, I can play with my fingers. The lower clappers down here are about 25 or 30 pounds, so you really can't do those with your fingers. The upper ones are, you can do more with your fingers because they're just a few ounces. And so we usually make a fist to play the carillon, and then we just do it like this. So the lower half of the keyboard has pedals that we play with our feet, and there's a whole keyboard with the pedals as well. And that just allows us to play a few more. So for the really low notes, I need the weight of my whole leg behind me to play. If I play 4 notes, well, I have 2 hands and 2 feet, so that allows us to play a few more notes that way. But the harder we hit it, the louder it is, and the softer we hit it, the softer it is. So we have to have that dynamic control of the carillon. But I always try to emphasize that it's a musical instrument because, you know, some carillons play automatically, like ours plays the hour strike automatically. But if it's playing music, it's really somebody who's actually playing. And so, you know, I think it's important to make sure that we keep the focus on the fact that it's a musical instrument that brings everybody together, and it's the bells in the tower.
The origins of carillons date back to 16th century Europe and regions of Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. These primitive carillons were used to mark the passage of time, call communities to worship, or signal important events. Over time, these bells evolved into musical instruments and symbols of status.
There's an old Dutch saying that says you can tell the quality of a city or the quality of a civilization by the quality of its schools and the quality of its bells. And so if people had well-tuned bells, then you knew not only did they have artisans who could make those things, but they also had the technical and the scientific ability to tune them and the cultural development to have some sort of musical life.
Today, carillons serve as cultural landmarks and sources of music in cities and towns around the world. From the iconic bells of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France, to the Grand Carillon of the Riverside Church in New York City, there are now more than 180 carillons in North America. Students of Missouri State University have the rare opportunity to learn how to play the carillon themselves. Alongside classes on music theory and form, Dr. Chessman offers a class on carillon performance.
So there's very few degree programs available in carillon in the world, and especially in the US. And so I think it's important, if you want something to be respected, you have to have official training, because every time you play, you're public relations for the carillon.
Since the carillon's dedication in 2002, more than 40 students have taken the class, some of whom have pursued careers playing the carillon.
In the piano performance degree, you're required to take 2 semesters of a secondary keyboard instrument. That can either be organ or it can be the carillon, because we're lucky enough to have a carillon here. Most piano majors choose to do the organ because it's easily accessible, but I decided that I wanted to be different, and so I chose to do the carillon. You would think it would be very similar to piano because it's a keyboard instrument, and definitely being a pianist has been very easy to pick up on the carillon and to learn the instrument, but there's definitely been some unique challenges. Like, first of all, when you play the piano, you just use your hands. With the carillon, you have to use literally all of the appendages that are available to you, so both your hands and your feet. The hardest thing for me was learning how to add, in the feet, the pedals. The coordination was insane, because when you're reading carillon music, you'll have manual lines, which you use for both of your fists, and then you'll have maybe a pedal line that is operated by your foot. And if you split the carillon in half, the left side is operated by your left foot. It should be anyways, and then the right side with your right foot. Sometimes you can cross over, but that was definitely the hardest part. Also, voicing in general, because you're in a cabin and the bells are literally up top, and so you can't really hear the product that you're producing in its true form. Only the people outside on the ground can hear that. Sometimes during lessons, Dr. Chessman will literally stay on the ground and listen to me outside, so we can get a true indicator of, oh, the dynamics here, maybe you need to be a little louder, and I can't hear that because I'm in the tower and the bells are separate. So that's definitely been some unique challenges.
The story of the Jane A. Meyer Carillon at Missouri State University began in the late 1990s with Wesley Wilson, the Student Government Association president at the time, and Dr. John Kaiser, the campus president. The two men wanted something to commemorate the upcoming centennial celebration of the university in 2005.
Well, to just give a little background, Dr. Kaiser was the president of Boise State University, and I was the director of research there. When he took the job at Southwest Missouri State University, he recruited me to come back with him, and so that was 1993. And one of the first priorities that we had when we got here was that the library needed to be expanded and it needed to be renovated. The driving force behind the carillon was, since we were doing the library anyway, Dr. Kaiser kind of thought this would be a good time for us to do one of his pet projects, and that was to have a carillon on campus. And so he wanted an icon to be at Southwest Missouri State. I want to go back to Missouri State. But so he wanted the carillon. While we were all working on getting funding for the library, he was actually working on getting funding to try to do the carillon, because that was really a passion of his. And Dr. Kaiser and his wife were very good friends with the Meyers. Jane Meyer was an organ major in music, and so she had a great love affair for that and was aware of the carillon and everything.
Ken and Jane Meyer were owners of Meyer Communications, which operated several broadcast stations in the Springfield area. The two philanthropists loved the university and funded several construction projects. Jane was a fan of the campus's women's basketball team, the Lady Bears, and made sure every game they played was broadcast on their radio stations.
Jane and Ken Meyer gave them the money for the carillon, and because of her love of music, they wanted to name the carillon after her. Ken Meyer was just really adored his wife quite a lot, and so that was a nice present that he kind of gave to her to put her name on it, because he would always say that she was the music person, and you know, anytime I would talk about anything related to music with him, he would always say, well, Jane was the music person, and he was always happy to hear updates and stuff. But yeah, she was the music lover, and he was the Jane lover, so that's why it happened that way.
They talked about it, and they said, yep, we will fund that. And the carillon bells, and there's 48 bells, and they're inscribed are names of they had a child that passed away young. They have a fairly small family that's scattered around, but they also would name a bell for their friends.
Design and planning of the carillon fell to Doug Sampson, the university architect at the time.
Very beginning, as somebody has a dream or a desire, a need that needs to be filled, so we'd sit down with the client, if you would, and really talk about the needs and write out a program describing exactly what needs to be done. And once we have the concept done, then you have to get into the nuts and bolts of how you actually structure it and make sure everything fits.
In the spring of 1999, a site study was conducted to find a location for the carillon. 12 locations on campus were reviewed. Due to the ongoing renovation of the Meyer Library, the decision was made to build the Carillon Tower as an extension.
Certainly within the library, there was excitement because we were so packed in the old building that we couldn't even shelve new books. The shelves were so crowded and the aisles were so crowded, so we were all very excited to get this additional space for the library. And I think the students were too, because the study space had dwindled over the years, and the new library added space for group study rooms, more classroom space, lounge space. So that was something that the students were really looking forward to.
Ultimately, once the design was completed, we'd have to put it out for bid, and if the bids were acceptable, we'd award a contract, start construction.
A local business, Pre-Stressed Casting Company, took the job of constructing the tower and began pouring foundations. 8 concrete piers were drilled into bedrock, and over 100 cubic yards of concrete was poured to form the base. The tower itself was made up of 112 separate precast pieces of concrete. Sourcing the bells was challenging. Bell foundries, the places where bells are made, are rare in North America.
There aren't many bell foundries in the United States, so it was probably the only project I did where we bid contractors from Europe on our project. And the Bell Foundry of Astens, Netherlands was the successful bidder for our bells.
Once the project was underway, Mr. Sampson and his family traveled to Aston to visit the foundry while the bells were being forged.
And we took personal vacation when the bells were being cast to go over and see the bells and really learn more about the whole carillon industry. At the time, my son was 10 years old, so he really enjoyed it. In fact, we had a little family secret. The morning we were going to the foundry, if we didn't like it, he was going to give me a certain hand signal that he wanted to leave. Well, he didn't want to leave, he wanted to go back the next day, so we enjoyed it so much. But we went through the whole process of how the bells were created.
As part of Bell Foundry tradition, Mr. Sampson's son was allowed to toss some coins into the liquid metal during the casting process. Before this casting process can begin, the bell makers must create strickles of the inner and outer profiles of the bells.
What normally happens is you have different profiles and shapes of the bells. You have a profile for the inside of the bell and a profile for the shape of the outside of the bell.
The forging begins with the stacking of fire brick in the rough shape of the bell. The fire brick is covered by sand and rotated on a turntable, while the strickle removes excess sand. For larger bells, 2 layers of sand are placed to prevent collapsing. The sand is then covered in a fireproof coating. This pile of sand becomes the inner profile of the bell. This inner profile is covered in a layer of wax and spun to begin creating the outer bell profile. Once the shape is ready, ornamentation and inscriptions are applied by hand to the wax bell. The wax is covered in a fireproof membrane, forming the outer profile of the bell. A supporting framework is then added to the wax bell.
What you have is a wax bell, which is called the false bell. You have the wax bell inside and it's encased in concrete. Then they heat up the concrete and the wax falls away, and so you're left with a hollow spot in the inside that is going to be the shape of your new bell. So this is called the cire perdu, or the lost wax method of casting, where you make it out of wax, build the mold, and then you melt the wax away.
Bronze and tin are melted into a heated bucket and checked for impurities. This mixture is then poured into the bell mold and is left to cool.
The floor of a foundry is a dirt floor usually, so they dig a hole and then they put that the mold in the hole, and they bring the bronze and pour it in the top of the mold, and then they bury it.
After several days of cooling underground, the bells are removed. The bells are sandblasted, cleaned, and their pitch is tested. Material is removed from the inner surface to fine-tune their sound.
So that's how the bell is cast. And then, of course, there's a lot of cleaning up, around the lettering and the lathing on the inside for tuning after that.
After a final cleaning and polishing, some of the bells are pre-mounted onto their support beams and prepared for shipping. After a 25-day journey across the Atlantic, they arrived in Springfield, Missouri on August 6, 2001. Experts from the Netherlands also arrived to oversee and assist in the assembly of the bells.
Earlier this morning, the keyboard was raised up to the keyboard cabin. If you look up, you'll see a window high up above top of the tower. That is where the keyboard used to play the bells is located. That's already been placed this morning. The next step, we're going to raise the 6 largest bells up to the bell chamber, and that's located directly above the keyboard cabin. Once those 6 bells are located, the rest of the bell framework will start with the largest bell framework that's located closest to the tower. We'll go up over the 6 bells that are placed, and then the framework that's got the smaller bells on it will be placed on top of that. Once that's in place, the contractor, the Royal Ice Bouts, the bell foundry, will start connecting the bells to the keyboard.
It was interesting to watch them when they first brought the bells in and started assembling everything. It was fascinating because some of those bells are huge.
And I don't think we quite realized to begin with how many bells and how large they'd be.
During the construction, then Dean of Library Services Karen Horney and then Associate of Library Services Neosha Mackey were lifted by crane up to the tower, where they watched the construction and the massive bells up close.
The crane lifted us up the whole way, and we got to look into the tower and see the bells hanging there, which was pretty exciting.
After many years of planning and building, the Carillon Bell Tower was completed. The 2.5 million pound, 140-foot tall structure became the tallest carillon in the Midwest, and one of few in North America as a whole. The carillon was dedicated on April 13, 2002. Jane A. Meyer passed away on February 1, 2002, just 2 months before the dedication ceremony. When Dr. Chessman arrived at Missouri State University in 2002, he didn't get the chance to meet Jane Meyer. However, he did get the opportunity to meet then-President Dr. John Kaiser.
So I met him when I first got here, and he was interested in the carillon and wanted to know kind of about what we were doing. And he did come to some of the first carillon concert events. We had a big dedication in April of 2002, and that was a big university hullabaloo. And then our first summer series then. And he was very supportive all the time of giving money for the summer series concerts and some of our early recital series and our early student support. So if it hadn't been from him, we wouldn't have the carillon here, I know. Yeah, and it wouldn't be as successful a program as it is.
In the 20 years since the tower's construction, it has been host to many events.
So in September of my first year would have been the 1-year anniversary of September 11th. So I did play a memorial concert for that year. And they had a candlelight vigil outside by the carillon, so a lot of people came. It's been really connected to the university environment. I think I've done 2 wedding proposals underneath the carillon.
During the summer, the Meyer Carillon becomes the centerpiece of 4 concerts every year.
There's been a series of concerts, often with guest carillonneurs during the summertime, and that's been quite delightful. I was able to attend one of them not too long ago, and it was a real treat. It's nice to hear the bells played. It gives a very distinctive opportunity for the campus to hear a concert of the bells.
But really to have that tower on campus and to have what's the world's largest instrument on our campus really set our campus apart. I remember going to all the concerts because that was really special on Sunday afternoons right there at the fountain. It was special to Jane's heart to have something that she loved, and that was music.
The Jane A. Meyer Carillon has had an impact on the university and local communities for over 20 years. The tower, its music, and the newly renovated library made for an exciting time to be a student.
It's certainly a special feature of Missouri State, and every university likes to have something that is a known image for the institution. And this bell tower shows up a lot of times on Missouri State publications, Missouri State websites, T-shirts. Those are important images for everyone on campus, and the students appreciate it being an image that they can relate to.
I think one of the best things about campus is the fact that we can hear all this music, like everyone can hear music that maybe they haven't heard on a day-to-day basis, and that's transmitted through the carillon. Dr. Chessman will play music that is written by composers that have specifically written for the carillon, so it's definitely great exposure for the students. And then of course the chimes that are like every half hour are extremely iconic. The bells, they just have such a sonorous, like bright tone. It's hard to walk through campus and not just feel uplifted, like when you're hearing carillon music. That's how it makes me feel whenever I hear Dr. Chessman playing or I'm playing. It's extremely uplifting, and I think that it really uplifts and brightens overall the campus mood.
I think it's taken for granted. You just hear the carillon and maybe you don't think about it. But hearing the carillon, it's so unique that I remember my first day on campus and I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm on a college campus. I felt smart, you know? And the carillon is just part of that atmosphere.
The carillon was really a source of pride. And what I really like more than anything is when I first came here, the students would normally be wearing shirts from Mizzou and different places. And by the time we got the name changed, they were wearing Missouri State shirts. And so having that pride in the student body and having pride on campus, and the carillon and all the buildings and all the things that take place on campus to create that pride for the students. That's the most important thing to me.
Sometimes I think people don't realize how special it is that they have a carillon here, but I've done as best I can here to lay the groundwork and lay the infrastructure and get the carillon integrated into the university. So I hope that when I retire that it'll continue, because it's a unique thing for the university.
And that's sort of what you want to do with your life after you die. You still want to make an impact, and you can. And Jane and Ken continue to make an impact, and they've been gone for a long time.
Unfortunately, I think so many places run where that if you can't see a monetary contribution, that it doesn't have as much value. Things are tenuous in the arts all the time, and you really have to fight to keep them around. For me, the biggest thing is the impact that I leave on my students, and so my students are doing good things with the carillon in the world, and just good thing as humans, which is also an important thing. And you know, the only legacy that any of us could leave is that we made the world a little bit more beautiful while we were here. And so I think about all the music that I played and really try to have some sort of human connection. You know, I think we call the humanities, but we don't think about that's the thing that makes us human and not computers. And that's something that's really important to me. And so the only thing we have is what we have right now. And so I try to make that, and every time I'm up here, an important experience.
The Caroline has really stood the test of time, and it is an icon for Missouri State University, and I think it will be for a long time to come, and so we're very proud of it. It's a lasting legacy for Dr. Kaiser and his vision of how to get Missouri State University to be more well-known and accepted by the students.